Blog Radio.
You're listening to Talent Culture's T-Chat Radio. The World of Work is live now on the radio with Megan M. Biro and Kevin W. Grossman, because middle initials count.
Come down, turn the radio on. Take my hand, turn the radio on. Come on, my favorite song, baby. Let's dance, turn the radio on.
Welcome everybody out there in Talent Culture T-Chat Show land. It is Wednesday, July 29th. It is 1 p.m. Eastern if you're on the East Coast and 10 a.m. Pacific if you're on the West. I'm actually on the East Coast this week, and with you as always is Kevin W. Grossman, and of course the lovely and talented Megan M. Biro. Hi, Megan.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, community. What's happening? I'm here, by the way, in New England at the home office in Cambridge, Mass. And
Indeed.
It is summer. Summertime
It is.
here. It's like 90 and humid. Something like that, right?
90 and humid. Yeah, I'm actually at the Waltham office for People Fluent, and it is. I went on a nice long workout hike today behind the office, and it was about balmy 72 at 6 a.m. So.
Well, I just want to give a shout out. I am lucky enough to be invited to the Newport Jazz Festival as a VIP this weekend, so I want to kind of give everybody over at the Jazz Festival a shout out, saying that I am so excited. I'm going to be there with some friends and family in Newport, Rhode Island, and I'll be covering the event there. So we're looking forward to it. So.
Oh, very nice. That's lovely.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So let's get this party started today.
Sure. Yeah. So we want to first thank all of our great friends and sponsors that include Dice Jive, TalentWise, Hootsuite, IBM, Career Builder, People Fluent, Smart Search, our social analytics partner, HR Marketer Insight, and of course, a special shout out, as always, to the Candidate Experience Awards. And speaking of things related to recruiting and sourcing and candidate experience, that's what we're going to talk about this week. Yeah, we talked about last week, we talked about how HR drives positive workforce impact with the right data insights. And this week we're going to talk about why recruiting is a legitimate career choice. Of course, it is. I played a recruiter on TV. Megan has actually been a recruiter. So the good news is that we know it's quite legitimate. And unlike HR, however, formal education is still lacking for recruiters and sourcers, largely ignored and dismissed by academia. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight with some of the new comprehensive training programs and institutes that exist, particularly in and around our guest who has founded that as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today on the show. If you're on the Twitters, make sure to use the hashtag TChat, TCHAT. We're going to do the radio show till 1:30 Eastern, and then we'll jump on the Twitter chat. But, of course, it's a stream the whole time. So, and then remember, the show is always a podcast after the fact. So let's introduce our guest.
I am so excited to introduce our guest today. I mean, talk about somebody who's helping the industry with making recruiting a legit career choice. I am a huge fan of the idea, obviously, as somebody who has worn a recruiter hat in the past. I don't know why it would ever be questioned that it's not, but we know anyone who's been in the recruiting trenches either now or previously knows that it's a big topic. So please welcome the one, the only Shally Sterkel at SHALLY on the Twitters. And he's got like 20 million other Twitter handles, and he'll tell you more about those later. But Shally Sterkel is the founder of the Sourcing Institute Foundation, and he's a pioneer in talent sourcing and recruiting. He builds enterprise recruiting engines for Fortune 500 brands, helping them to find the unfindable, which is so cool. He wrote the industry-defining textbook. Okay, I've got some secret code numbers here.
Oh, that's an ISBN number.
Shh, don't tell anybody. ISBN 978-1928-734 796. He's an
Now you've
adjunct
done it.
faculty at Temple and Brandman Universities, and he speaks regularly at HR conferences around the world. Welcome, Shally.
Wow, thank you. Glad to be here. This is very exciting. I don't know if it's the coffee or butterflies or nerves or whatever, but feeling jittery.
Don't be nervous. We're all really friendly here, especially to recruiters.
Exactly.
There you go.
So, Shally, why
So
don't you tell us a little bit?
Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
more
what's
about
up?
what's happening in your world.
Yeah, please.
Well, the big news is the foundation is up and going. We got our letter of determination in February, so we are officially a 501c3, and as you can imagine, that is a pretty big deal. It's very hard to get those these days. So that's been a big part of my focus, that and trying to survive the summer.
Yeah. And where do you live right now and work? Where are you based out of?
Home for me is in Atlanta, Georgia. It's actually just a little bit outside of the city, so it's a bit of a suburban mixture between all the worst traffic and all the worst pollution with all the worst commutes. But we love it here, and we've been here for a while now. So this is home, at least for the foreseeable future. No plans to go anywhere else.
But you travel pretty extensively, kind of like Kevin and I do, right? I mean, you tend to kind of be everywhere, or what's your travel like these days?
Yeah, you're right. I am pretty much everywhere all the time, thanks to the internet. But frankly, I traveled a lot more. I think my record year was 350,000 miles in 1 year, and that was because of a couple of international trips, like to Asia and so on. But the typical year, probably about 150,000 miles, and I'm actually under that this year. It's not been a very travel-intensive year, primarily because I kind of cut back a little bit on going to conferences and events until the foundation is, in full swing and we really have something to promote. So it's been like that.
I hear you. You know what? I find in trying to, manage a business and wear the hats that I wear, sometimes travel just takes you out of that queue, doesn't it? Although it's exciting and fun and exhilarating, and it's like you got to find that balance, right, Shally? It's
as good as I've gotten, doing telecommuting for what? I don't know, probably since 2000. Actually, no, probably since like 1998. In some way, shape, or form, I've gotten pretty good at the whole mobile office. But there's a lot of time going through security, waiting in line, driving to and from, and so the whole airport thing. It really does put a hole in your productivity.
It does.
That's why it's good having a pajama office, pajama office.
Ooh,
there you go.
Hey, that's a good concept.
I have a fully dressed paper cutout of myself that I put on the webcam.
That's awesome. Love it.
Excellent.
So tell me right now, what's the career makeup of today's recruiting and sourcing pro? How does it differ right now from pre and post internet activities? I know you guys covered that a little bit on the podcast, but let's uncover that just a little further.
Well, it started out, this is a job that started out as a responsibility of office managers who used to place job ads in newspapers, and you can even go way back to the help wanted sign that was hung at the front of the office or the front of the store or whatever when people were hiring apprentices. So, the social media today is yesteryear's help wanted sign, and in between then there's been a lot of changes, although many things have stayed the same. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but what's happened now is it's grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry because there's a lot of confusion around the lack or availability of talent. A lot of people think that there's a lack of talent. Others think that there's an overabundance. You have conflicting opinions over the employment rate. So as a result, what's happened is our field, the field of employment management, staffing, recruiting, whatever you want to call it, has changed and has essentially begun to specialize. And we've seen that in many other industries, in legal and marketing and sales, inbound sales, outbound sales, telemarketing, direct sales, outside sales, all that stuff. Our industry is just one of the latest ones to, if not probably the last one, to develop this kind of specialization. And that's what we're seeing now is that calm before the storm of, we're trying to define what is recruiting.
Yeah. No, I know. I am so with you on how interesting of a time this is to be a practitioner with all of this HR and technology and innovation happening, and it's been happening for a number of years. That's why this is even more interesting, right? And more time pressing.
It is time pressing. There is, in my opinion, in my experience, having worked with a lot of large companies and trained recruiters all over the world and built sourcing teams and recruiting teams at large companies, like Microsoft and Google and Cisco and Motorola and Coke, I can tell you that there's always someone hiring. So, there is no worldwide talent shortage, but there is a significant shortage in certain fields, and that's what it drives employers crazy, because they'll be doing 70 or 80% of their positions are filled through what they normally do, their process, whatever it happens to be at the time. And then there's these, 10 to 15 positions that just go perpetually unfilled because, people don't work on them. And that's where in those small segments, there's not enough talent and for a number of other reasons. And then there's this other gray area, another 15% of jobs that they just don't respond to the traditional means. So you've got, some positions where I'd say about 10 to 15% where you have to just source people because there's not enough people to do the job, and another, say, 10 or 15% where sourcing isn't because those people don't exist or there's not enough of them, but because they're hard to reach, they're hard to talk to, they're hard to connect with, and they're not applying for jobs.
Yes.
Hey, Shelly. Exactly. Yeah. So what about though? The differentiation and I guess the specialization that's also occurred both inside, meaning corporate recruiting, as well as outside third-party recruiting, because they both existed together or coexisted, right? And it even can be considered a symbiotic relationship, whatever. But it's more prevalent. The third-party recruiting is more prevalent in other markets, the UK, Australasia, all that good stuff. But how do you see that differentiation? Does that continue to specialize in the RPO and the outsourcing side as well?
There's specialization throughout the whole industry in its entirety. Search firms used to be general practice search firms. I mean, the first few ones that were born out of your Big Four type of consulting firms, the first few headhunting, white glove executive search firms that came out, like Egon Zehnder and Heidrick and Struggles, and those organizations, they used to just look at, we're going to help your company hire people for a certain level, but in any industry. And then it became, all right, well, you guys work on that. We're going to work on the mid-level. We place managers, you place executives. And then there's we place, the lower level, rank and file, the entry level, light industrial. So, there's been specialization in the staffing industry. And now there's even more, as you said, specialization in the models that staffing companies and staffing partners use. It's no longer just a traditional retainer. It's retainer and contingency. It's contingency and container. Pay me some in advance, the rest later.
Right.
It's contract,
right.
It's hourly. It's name generation. So there's a great deal of specialization, and that's really in response to the need, because not every employer has the same need. They have, a lot of companies have a pretty good handle on their hiring for most jobs. The few that they can't fill, they need help with, and they don't always need the same kind of help.
Right. It depends on the role in the job. Absolutely.
So I'm going to have to just ask the $1 million question. Because I know this is going to be multifaceted once I ask it. But besides certificate and training, how else do we legitimize, in air quotes, and I think legitimize is, I don't care for that term. I think recruiting is plenty legit, by the way. So shout out to all of you practitioners out there who are still in a trench. But how do we legitimize recruiting as a career choice if we need to? How do we do that?
Well, unfortunately, I wish it was true what you just said, but it really isn't. One thing that has happened to me since I sort of left the big popular conference circuit behind and started moving in a different direction is that I've noticed that the large body of people who work in this field, recruiters and HR and leaders of organizations who don't go to these events and these conferences, which is the majority, to them, recruiting is not a legitimate career choice. In many cases, it is a happenstance. Well, we don't know what to do with you, so we're going to move you into this temporary role where you're going to filter some resumes and schedule some interviews, and then, oh wow, look at that, you're pretty good at selecting resumes. Why don't we put you in charge of recruiting? And then before you know it, that person's on a recruiting field for a couple, 3 years or 4 or whatever. They never expected it, and then they're looking for a way out. So a lot of companies still see recruiting as a as something that needs to get done. CEOs hate recruiting in a lot of reasons for why they hate recruiting is because it damages their brand. Recruiting, when it's not done well, is really horrible for your company. When you reject candidates, and that's why the Candies, I know you guys shout out to the Candies all the time. That's why the Candies is such a big deal. People that are applying for jobs are being mistreated, and sometimes it's because the company is trying to boil the ocean. You have an employer that has 6,000 openings, 5,000 of those they don't really need to do much other than just some advertising, and then they have the other 1,000 and they advertise those, trying to fill them, but then they get all kinds of applicants that are not, they're not a fit. So those people get rejected, and the brand suffers, and then the CEO doesn't really get the value. So there really is a need to change, and the answer to your question is, how do we legitimize that? The way to legitimize that, I think, is twofold. One is we need to create some sort of national organization similar to what's out there for other professions, accountants and attorneys. And yes, I know you can go to school and get a degree in law and get a degree in accounting, but you can also take the CPA exam without a degree, and I think you can take the bar exam without a degree as well. I'm not sure because I'm not an attorney, but there's other industries out there where the association that is the I don't want to say governing body because they don't govern,
but it's more
some sort of So that's one. The other one is to, for Christ's sake, put this in academia. I mean, why aren't universities teaching this? I teach at Temple University a recruiting course that's 1 semester, full 3 credit hours, but it is the only one of its kind.
That is fantastic, Sally. I love that you do that. And I have to tell you, I'm not only somebody who's talking about this, but early on in my career, I thought I wanted to be a clinical psychologist of all things. And
how do you feel about that?
I left that program to become, guess what, a headhunter.
Right.
And at the time, I think if I had to rework my career, instead of becoming a clinical psychologist, maybe I would have become an organizational psychologist, right? Somebody who specializes in something called workplace culture and people, all that fun stuff. But to kind of fast forward, I totally get it as somebody who myself, I walked that line of, I loved being a recruiter when I was. I loved dealing with people and understanding the puzzle of culture and fit and sales and, and so I think there's a lot of people like myself who, I also never planned to be a recruiter. So I am one of those people. And I think just offering it up in academia, having classes in college, and, what is it like? I'm completely on board with that concept from a lot of different angles,
If anybody out there listening to the show knows people in the academic setting, in HR and business programs, that are willing to take a look at a course, I have a syllabus for the course that I teach. I'm more than happy to share that. I can't be everywhere and teach this myself, so I'd be happy to talk with other people that might want to include their curriculum. We have a textbook.
Let's do that.
So if you know anyone, let us know. We'd love to get this. That's going to help legitimize the industry when you can sit across from a hiring manager that has a degree and certifications and say, hey, this is my profession. I too studied this at school, right? Yeah. And then there's a third thing, Megan, that I don't know why I completely overlooked, but in addition to that national kind of organization, body, whatever you want to call it, and the academia, there's a third thing, and that third thing is standards. Now, I sit on a committee with a few other thought leaders in the industry that is the ISO, the International Standards Organization Committee for Standardizing Recruiting. It's the Technical Committee 260, and this is an international initiative. I sit on the body that is the representative for the U.S. globally, but something like that is deputized by, in our case in the U.S., ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, where there's a definition out there that, here's a document that says this is recruiting. Recruiting, if I had my way, I would define it as recruiting is finding, attracting, engaging, assessing, and onboarding talent for available work within an organization. That's, I think, an industrial size definition. But having someone like ISO and ANSI say, here's the definition, here's the standard, then you can sit across from a hiring manager or a teacher or a business leader that has ISO certification and say, hey, our business is also ISO. That brings legitimacy.
Right. I have a question. And Kevin, jump on in after. Sorry. Where does branding and employer branding and marketing come into the picture of being a recruiter? I seem to be spending a lot more time on the branding side than ever these days, rather than as obviously a recruiting practitioner. Are you seeing that as a major movement on any level, Shelly, in terms of marketing and recruiting becoming partners?
Absolutely.
In terms of the role?
If you could, in your mind's eye, draw a circle. At the top of the circle, you have what would be considered the strategic roles, right? Strategy. On the bottom of the circle, you would have essentially operations. And in the middle, you would have tactics, right? On the left and right side of that circle, you have inbound and outbound. On the left-hand side, for example, we'll say inbound, and on the right-hand side, we'll say outbound. Recruiting, it covers the entire circle, and on the inbound side, there are marketing activities, branding, social media, advertising. On the outbound side, there's sourcing and cold calling. Both of these are needed, and in some organizations, one more than other. So it's not a matter of, is sourcing the answer, is marketing the answer. Sourcing and marketing are both on those two sides of that circle. The center of the circle, by the way, is the bullseye. That's the hire. But around the outside of that circle, you've got strategic up in the high left, strategic marketing, strategic advertising. That's your branding. That's what's the vision for the company. In the middle, you have tactical. That's where you go out and do the social media and, put one foot in front of the other and go out there and actually engage. And then operational, that's your day-to-day, the grind, right, in marketing. And on the other side, you've got where is the talent that we want? What kind of talent? That's the strategic. Then there's let's cold call these people, talk to them on the phone, email them, contact them. That's the tactical. And then the operational is your day-to-day sourcing. You have recruiters that are sourcers that find people. You have recruiters that are social media experts that do engagement and branding, or one or the other. There are recruiters that do marketing on a bigger scale, the strategic side of marketing. And so there's room for all of these. The problem is that when you say recruiting, most people think, Army, right? Like those strip mall offices where they have a Marine recruiting center and Army and Navy and Air Force, and it's like conscriptions, like, oh yeah, we're going to sign you up. That's what people associate with recruiting. So there's a lack of, because of the lack of definition, there's a lack of understanding about all the nuances and the specialties within the discipline. So when you say branding, you go, oh, well, we do branding. We don't do recruitment sourcing, or, we don't do cold calling. We do branding. Good. That's 1/8 of the picture. Then there's these other 7 things that also need to get done.
Hey, Shelly, that was love what you just outlined there. But also keep in mind both the British and the American versions of The Office have painted HR as a caricature for a long, long time, and yet that institution on the certification and training side has thrived. I mean, why do you think that is? Why is that the case? I mean, you're doing a lot of work, and we're going to talk about that in the next few minutes as well, on helping to establish recruiting and sourcing and legitimatizing it. But why has that happened? Why has HR thrived on that side?
HR survived on that side because it is a very well-defined field that has grown organically. In other words, we needed HR for some very specific reasons. EEOC, for example, compliance and audit and stuff like that. So the rules already existed, and they were able to conveniently, and I don't mean this in a dismissive way, they were able to conveniently define the role because, by a large degree, it was already it was a required job. You know, large employers had an employment an employment services kind of department. It wasn't always called HR. And then as laws got passed and things got, more complicated, you needed someone that was in charge of that risk mitigation, et cetera. If you go to other countries that have a less developed economic system, you'll notice that role doesn't quite exist yet. They have an operations person, but not really someone that's in charge of HR as we refer to it here. They're concerned with a great many other things. They're concerned with their employees staying safe in the workplace, but they may not be concerned with employee relations yet because they're not evolved to that point. So, I guess the bottom line is HR got there first. They were bigger. There's more of them. It was more legally required. And so we're next.
Well, and I remember a time when HR and recruiters were always at odds with each other, because I was one of those recruiters. Like, why is HR? Why am I fighting an uphill battle on this talent strategy with the HR team? But the CEO is completely on board. And I remember those days very well. And times have changed, obviously, thank goodness, and there's so much more collaboration. But I also think, to your point, Shally, just defining HR and defining recruiting is a good first step in and of itself, Yeah. And then there's so much more there.
Right.
Exactly.
I think what
we're down. Shally, we're down to about 3 minutes. So I thought, why don't we take the opportunity? And sorry to cut you off, but we want you to tell us all more about the Sourcing Institute Foundation and what your mission is right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that in the last couple of minutes?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The Sourcing Institute Foundation is sourcingfoundation.org, and on Twitter we are essentially just if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's just Sourcing Inst, Sourcing INST for the Sourcing Institute, and we also have a foundation account. But basically, what it is, our mission is to provide educational grants for people with disabilities, returning veterans and their spouses, and other qualifying candidates that can find productive and, I would say, profitable employment in the talent sourcing and recruitment industry. So essentially, we are providing the funds and the means for people that are in tough situations to learn our field and become tomorrow's recruiters. We leverage the training that I've developed over the last 18 years or so. I've donated a lot of this myself in the intellectual property and a lot of the systems and technology, but we also will fund grants for other training as well. It's not just the Sourcing Institute's training. We will pay for whatever training someone needs in order to get into the field. But what we're doing is essentially we're creating jobs by taking people that have probably the best way to illustrate the success of what we do is in May 1st, we graduated our first class of blind students. There were 5 people that we identified from a large group of applicants that we thought were going to have the highest probability of success. We put them through the training, and they became recruiters and are now in production as recruiters. And these are 100% blind. Just so you know, in the blind community, about 80% of the population is unemployed, not by choice. They are actively seeking work and simply can't get hired. And it's not because they're blind. There are a lot of jobs blind people can do. Of course, they can't be drivers and other things like that, but there are a lot of other jobs. It's because of really discrimination. People don't really, they don't understand. They think it's going to be too difficult to work with a blind person, et cetera. So we're proving that wrong. We also have deaf or hard of hearing graduates, and we have veteran graduates as well. Veteran spouses is another one. When they're deployed out in the field and they're stationed overseas for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, the spouse, male or female, no gender bias here, sometimes has a hard time finding work. There's just not enough jobs at the embassy to fulfill all that. So this is a job that, as many of you know, can be done remotely, and so veteran spouses can be good recruiters and sourcers overseas, provided with the right technology and environment. So that's what we're doing. We're creating jobs, both helping the economy and also our industry.
Excellent.
My biggest, what I want to do is I want to create a whole.
We got the ding, ding, ding. We got the.
Oh, ding, ding, ding. All right.
We're about to go. We're
running
out
out.
the air, but I want to thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Yep.
And I want to give a shout out quickly to @John Thurmond on Twitter. who said, "Don't think I've ever met anyone who went to college planning to become a recruiter. I think it's a great way to end this podcast." Agreed. I think there's a new movement now. Let's all get on board, and let's get a bunch of college students and beyond, even people who aren't going to college too. Let's include them. Maybe someday you're going to grow up and become a recruiter, and it's going to be by design. So fabulous
Absolutely.
show. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you over on the Twitters.